The Bentley's door opened and Alexander Vance stepped out into the pouring rain, his Italian shoes splashing in puddles that refugees and beggars called home. He didn't see the desperate faces lining the embassy district. He saw obstacles between him and his waiting helicopter. Another day, another $1 million to make. Then a small hand touched his sleeve. "Sir," a voice whispered through the downpour, "I can make your daughter walk again." Alexander froze, the rain suddenly feeling like ice water. How could this ragged street boy know about Isabella? Her condition was his most closely guarded secret. He turned, ready to call security. But what he saw in the boy's eyes wasn't desperation. It was a certainty, and in that moment the richest man in the city realized he might be standing before the one thing his money couldn't buy. The boy stood shivering in a thin jacket, his face smudged with dirt, but his eyes burning with an intelligence that didn't belong on the streets. He couldn't have been more than 12. Alexander's bodyguards moved forward, but he waved them back. "What did you say?" "Your daughter," the boy repeated, his English precise despite his appearance. "The one who hasn't walked since the car accident. I can help her." Alexander's blood ran cold. The accident had been kept out of the press. Isabella's paralysis was known only to family and their most trusted staff. "Who sent you?" Alexander demanded, his voice low and dangerous. "No one," the boy said. "I watched you help her from the car yesterday. I saw how her legs moved, the wrong muscles firing. The doctors are looking at the wrong problem." Alexander stared. This wasn't possible. The best neurologists in the world had examined Isabella. How could this street child see what they'd missed? The boy reached into his ragged backpack. The bodyguards tensed, but he only pulled out a notebook. The pages were filled with intricate anatomical drawings, mathematical equations, and what looked like engineering schematics. "My name is Kofi," the boy said, "and I think I can give your daughter back her legs." Against every instinct, Alexander brought Kofi to his penthouse. The boy moved through the marble halls like a ghost, his eyes taking in everything but showing no surprise at the opulence. Isabella sat in her wheelchair by the window, watching the city lights. At 14, she'd built walls around her pain that even her father couldn't breach. "Who's this?" she asked, her voice flat. "He says he can help you walk," Alexander said, feeling foolish even as he spoke the words. But Kofi was already kneeling before her wheelchair, his hands hovering respectfully. "May I?" Isabella shrugged. Whatever. Kofi's examination was unlike anything Alexander had seen. He didn't use machines or instruments. He watched the way Isabella breathed, how her fingers twitched when she tried to move her toes, the subtle asymmetry in her shoulders. "The crash damaged your T12 vertebra," Kofi said quietly. "But the real problem is here." He pointed to her lower back. "The nerves are trying to repair themselves, but they're creating faulty connections. Like crossed wires." Alexander stared. "How could you possibly know that?" Kofi didn't look up from his work. "I watched my father perform surgeries for years. He was the best neurosurgeon in Ghana before the war took everything from us." He gently pressed 2 fingers against Isabella's spine. "Try to move your right foot," Isabella concentrated. Her foot twitched, the first movement she'd had in months. Her eyes widened. "How did you do that?" "Your nerves are still there," Kofi said. "They're just lost. I think I can help them find their way home." For 6 weeks, Kofi worked with Isabella daily. He used techniques that baffled Alexander: acupressure, neural retraining exercises, even something he called muscle memory activation that involved having Isabella visualize movements while he applied precise pressure to specific points along her spine. The medical team Alexander hired, initially skeptical, grew increasingly amazed. Dr. Sharma, the lead neurologist, pulled Alexander aside after the 4th week. "Whoever this boy is, he's a prodigy," she admitted. "His understanding of neuroplasticity is revolutionary." One rainy afternoon, as Kofi guided Isabella through another session, something miraculous happened. Isabella stood, trembling, supported, but standing. Then she took a step. Then another. Tears streamed down Alexander's face as he watched his daughter walk across the room into her mother's arms. Later, he found Kofi packing his small bag. "Where are you going?" Back to the streets, Kofi said simply. Your daughter can walk now. Alexander stared at the boy who had given him back his world. You're not going back to the streets. You're coming to live with us. I'm going to make sure you become the doctor your father wanted you to be. Kofi's composure finally broke. Tears filled his eyes. My father. He always said knowledge was worthless if you didn't use it to help others. 10 years later, Dr. Kofi Mensah stood at the podium of the International Medical Conference, the youngest person ever to receive the Nobel Prize in Medicine. In the front row sat Alexander and Isabella Vance. Isabella now a professional dancer, her paralysis a distant memory. Our work in neural pathway redirection began with a simple observation, Kofi told the packed auditorium, that sometimes the most brilliant minds are hidden in the most unexpected places. After the ceremony, Kofi walked through the hospital that bore his name, the Kofi Mensah Neural Rehabilitation Center, funded by Alexander Vance and treating patients from every background, regardless of their ability to pay. In his office, he kept 2 photographs side by side, one of his father in his surgical scrubs in Ghana, the other of that rainy day when a beggar boy had stopped a billionaire and changed both their lives forever. Alexander found him there. You know, I went to that corner for years afterward, he said. Looking for another you? Kofi smiled. There are other me's everywhere, Mr. Vance. They just need someone to see past their circumstances to their potential. Down the hall, they could hear Isabella teaching dance to children in wheelchairs, showing them the first steps toward walking. Just as Kofi had once shown her, the circle had closed. But for Kofi, the work was just beginning, because he knew better than anyone that miracles didn't just happen. Sometimes, you had to create them yourself. If you enjoyed this heartwarming story, please hit the subscribe button. Thanks for watching.